What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Too Pop to Handle. I'm your host, Andrew Nucatola, your pop culture best friend, and as always, I hope you guys are having a fabulous week. It is quite the exciting week in the life of Andrew Nucatola. It is my last week of my 20s. I know, it is crazy. I turn 30 this weekend. I know I said this last week too, but it's like saying it out loud makes it feel real, which is crazy. This is literally my last episode in my 20s, which is nuts. And I'm having that moment where I'm like, everything I do this week, I'm like, oh, this is my last time doing this in my 20s. This is my last Monday in my 20s. This is my last this in my 20s. And like, it's not a bad thing. Like I'm actually very excited for my 30s. And I feel like you always hear it from people in their 30s who are like, there's that cliche of like the 30s are your best decade. And I really feel like that is something that you come to realize as you get closer to 30. So I'm very excited for 30, but my birthday, it is coming up this Sunday. I am very excited. I actually had some early birthday celebrations that were completely unexpected this weekend. First, I got a surprise package from my friend Tashi, which I know she listens to every week. So hello, Tashi. Thank you for always listening. And thank you so much for your gift. It was so sweet. She sent me a bottle of Erin Lychee from Roni, her mezcalum, which I've been dying to try. And she sent me a bottle. It was actually signed by Erin, which is so cool. So thank you so much for that. And then I also went out to dinner with my boyfriend and our friend Gretel, and we went to our friend's restaurant and they sent me out a little dessert and like had the whole candle and everything. Totally not expecting to do like a full birthday week / month or however it works out, but very, I will take all the love. I'm an Aries. I love attention. But yes, this is the last episode I'm recording in my 20s on Sunday. Your boy turns the big 3-0 and it is very, very exciting. I am excited. I'm ready for it. I am taking on this next decade in the best way possible. That being said, if anybody's looking for a gift to get me, go ahead and leave me a 5-star rating. The best gift I could ask for. Anyway, I had a very fun weekend. Like I said, we did some celebrating. We had our first 70-degree and sunny day in the city in New York this weekend, which meant we were outside. And not only were we outside, we were also slapped in the face with reality. There was some statistic. It was like the biggest drop in temperature in one day that Central Park has ever seen. It went from like 78 degrees to 53 or something crazy like that. It dropped like 20 degrees. So I was out in shorts and a short sleeve shirt all day long. We came home, we changed for dinner, and I put on jeans, but I kept on the same top. When I was coming home, I was literally shivering. Like my teeth were chattering. Fake spring punched me in the face, and you know what? It's what I deserve. I didn't look at the weather. I wasn't thinking ahead. I was living in the moment. I felt a little bit of warmth, and I decided to go buck wild. But we survived. It was nice to get a little taste of spring and summer and warm weather that is coming, like it was a good little teaser. And yeah, now we are back to our spring, rainy kind of weather. It's been back and forth. So we'll see, they're really, they're testing me on my 30th birthday weekend. They're really giving me a little run for my money on how the weather's going to be, but my plans are all inside. So rain, shine, we're going to drink, we're going to party, prepare for some disco ball Instagram stories this weekend. If you know, it will happen. Andy is coming out and I cannot wait to tell you guys all about my party next week. Also this weekend, I was lucky enough to score tickets to a screening of Ariana Grande's Brighter Days Ahead short film that she released over the weekend. So I got the tickets on Friday while I was at work and I hadn't seen the movie yet. So once I got the tickets, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go into this blind and not watch it beforehand. And I'm so glad that I took that little initiative and, I held out for 48 hours. I know, so brave of me, especially as somebody who like eats, sleeps, and breathes pop culture. It was a little bit hard to wait until Sunday, but I was like, it'll be worth it. It'll be fun to watch this for the first time in a movie theater and have like a unique little experience. The event was fabulous. It was so much fun. They had like popcorn buckets with Ariana on it. They had like her music playing, the posters. It was a really cool little I think it's like an independently owned movie theater. It's called the Quad Cinema, I think, because there's only 4 theaters there. That's just my assumption. I could be making that up, but it was really cute, really tiny, and it was like the perfect place for this kind of screening. And I loved the short film. I thought it was so well done. Ariana is such like a visionary artist. She's given us like incredible music videos time after time again. Like even thinking back to like Sweetener with No Tears Left to Cry and with the Thank You Next music video being such a big deal. Like she's really given us such great visuals with her albums for years. So it made sense that eventually she would do something in the visual album realm. And I think just knowing what we know about Eternal Sunshine and like where she's at mentally and where she's at with her life and like what this album means to her with all the like all the shit that she's been through in the last year, I think this one makes sense for the short film. And I think doing it for the deluxe version made so much sense because it wasn't such like a big thing to chew or swallow. It was a few songs she got to include. It wasn't anything crazy. And I loved it. I thought it was so funny watching older Ariana, or older Peaches rather, watching her past pop star self, and she's like dancing in her little wheelchair. I loved that. I thought the scene where she is like cut up and her dad is putting her back together and then they play the music and she like comes back to life. It was emotional. Like there was an emotional side to this entire short film, which was the point. It was supposed to be, like looking back on your life and your memories. And once these memories are gone, you're never reliving them again. So there was definitely like an emotional element to this film. It was so good, so well done. I love that they had like her home videos in there. She had her mom. She had like old videos of her. Like it was just so well done, and I really loved it. I also thought the tie-in to like the We Can't Be Friends music video and like being at Brighter Days, like it just showed us, it completed a story, and that's exactly what this album was meant to do. And this kind of perfectly leads us into our first segment, moving right into our Drew releases segment. Obviously, staying on the note of Ariana with this deluxe version of Eternal Sunshine that she dropped. The purpose of a deluxe album, as I've said a few weeks ago, is like to complete an album. And I think that is exactly what Ariana Grande did with this deluxe version of Eternal Sunshine. She completed a story. It didn't feel like songs that didn't feel like a piece of this project. Like, though this is a year later, and obviously she's releasing this after Wicked and all of this stuff came out, these songs still fit so perfectly into the album and the overarching storyline and message of Eternal Sunshine. And I think she just absolutely knocked it out of the park with this deluxe version. And if you listen to my episode, I want to say it was 2, maybe 3 weeks ago, about like the Billboard changes that are coming up. I was saying how, we've kind of lost the art of a deluxe album. And it used to be this big thing. And, it was exciting because you didn't know what it was going to be and like if it was to be expected. And then it kind of got like diminished by this idea of like these digital releases and like having to buy 4 or 5 different versions to complete a deluxe album. And it took away the fun of like a full packaged album, if that makes sense. And I think this was she did the perfect way of packaging this up as a whole new project, but also like paying homage to the album that came before it. I loved it. It was perfect. We're only going to dive into a few of these songs. I do want to do an entire Eternal Sunshine like album analysis video. I know it's late, but honestly, I don't really care. I want to sit down and do an entire track by track analysis, including the deluxe version. So I'm only going to go through a few of the songs, just my favorites from the deluxe, and then that will come eventually. Don't hold me to when I get to it, I will get to it. But that being said, kicking it off with, I think my favorite track on the album, it's got to be Warm. I love this track. It is so good. It just has this like fun, poppy vibe to it. We were actually, Thomas and I, my boyfriend, driving through Central Park on like city bikes over the weekend and like listening to that song like in my head, like driving through the park. I was like, this is what this summer is going to sound and feel like. It sounded like being outside in the warmth, like having fun, being with the people you love. I loved it. I love her vocals on it. I love the production on it. I loved it. I also love this whole message of her like finding somebody that she can unravel in, as she says, and like fully be herself. We've learned a lot about her past relationship with Dalton and now with her relationship with Ethan. And like, there's clearly a new level of comfortability that she has with Ethan that she didn't have in any of her past relationships. And you guys, it's a controversial relationship, I know, but I think we're past the point of like harping on it. I think we can just kind of like get on with it. Like they're together. It is what it is. Let's move on with the show. But it is nice to hear that like she's able to feel comfortable and be herself in this relationship and is able to really like find somebody who keeps her warm. She says, I'm cold on my own, but when I'm with you, I'm warm. So it's a cute little, not a simile. What is that? I spent a while since I've been in school. What am I? A metaphor. There we go. It's a cute little metaphor. I love this track. So good. The next one. Now, this one really took me for a loop because I was not expecting this like kind of turn on the album. But Dandelion first and foremost, that intro with the trumpet, I was like, okay, where are we going? It kind of gave us like a little, like a NOLA vibe, a little Louisiana with the trumpet. I was like, where are we going with this? And then the beat comes in and that bass line, and then that beat comes in and her vocals on it, just, it kind of took away from that like airy, breathy kind of Glinda that she was giving us. And it kind of went back to almost like positioned, even like Thank You Next Sweetener kind of vocals. Like it just had this like kind of like R&B kind of sound to it that she used to really lean into. And she leans in and out of it now, but she track, it is very, very positioned, where she was very like sexually forward with like how she's feeling. I mean, she's literally saying like, plant the seed, I'm your dandelion, like however you want, make your wish, and I'm yours. Like she's getting a little provocative again. I'm like, all right, Miss Ari, we see what you're doing. You're getting a little down and dirty. You're letting us know what's going on, with you and your man now. It was definitely a little bit of a turn than what we've heard on the rest of the album. It was more of like heartbreak and dealing with, the public and things like that. She wasn't really letting us in on her personal life in that sense. So, she had to give us a little, don't forget, like this is the girl who wrote 3435 at the end of the day, like she's definitely not shy in that subject, and I'll leave it at that. But love that track. Honestly, the entire extended version is just fantastic, but I think this last track on the album, Hampstead, is just unbelievable. It feels like a transformative track. And in some of the other songs, she kind of talks about like she's turned into somebody new. She's leaving her past life and she's leaving, everything in the past behind her. But this song really kind of fully encapsulates, I feel like, what the message of this album is. And there was a lot of chatter online about like, is this about her and her past relationship? Is it her with her having conversation with the media? And I think it really could be taken multiple ways. I don't think there's one way to interpret this song. I'm taking it more as her message to the public and just like kind of speaking to the masses and like being completely wrong about everything that goes on. She said that she left her heart in a pub in Hampstead, which is where she filmed Wicked, or where she was living when they filmed Wicked. She says, I threw away my reputation, but saved us more heartache. Yeah, I know it seemed fucked up and you're right, but quite frankly, you're still wrong about everything. So far off, you're nowhere near the table. I find something so sweet in your peculiar behavior because I think to be so dumb must be nice. So she's pretty much just sitting there talking her shit. And she's like, what happened in my life is fucked up. You're not wrong about that, but you still don't know the half of it. And I think the whole situation that happened with her and Ethan and whatever went down with Dalton, like obviously at this point we know that he cheated on her, and like that, I mean, even in the extended intro, she says like, you broke my heart, so I broke yours, or whatever it is. And like that whole narrative, I kind of gave a more look into the background of that. But I think the song really kind of speaks to where she's at with really just putting everything to rest. She's like, yeah, what happened was fucked up, but you still don't know the half of it. And I just think Ethan and Ariana's relationship is going to be one of those stories we kind of never know. We're always going to have the counter argument with his ex-wife. And, obviously that whole situation, like she said, was very fucked up. But at the end of the day, we'll never know exactly what went on behind the scenes, like we'll never really know the truth. So I think she just kind of like, I'm putting it to bed. Let me end this deluxe version with this song and let's move on with my life. Cause she's like, I've got another movie to put out. I've got more music to write. Like I have things to do. So I thought this was just a beautiful way to end the album. And also like the vocals on this, where she has like that sweetness in her voice during the verses. And then she comes in with that like, not wailing, but that like more like intense of like, what's wrong with like that part, like it just like really picks up. And like she had this like big vocal moment in the chorus, and it's just so beautiful. It's also that moment in the short film where she's coming back to life. So when you think of that visual of her kind of like coming back to life to this song and listening to the message of it, it really kind of is a full circle kind of thing, I'm kind of leaning a little bit too far into the analysis that I wanted to give, but I will go deeper on it on that episode when it comes out. I promise you I will do it because I have so many thoughts, and Thomas wants to actually come on, my boyfriend, and do it with me, which he is like the biggest Ariana Grande stan ever. So I think it would be so much fun for the two of us to sit down and do this. So we're definitely going to do it. We're a little bit busy the next few weeks, so We will see when it comes. It might be like a 2-year anniversary of the album. Maybe it would be like a year and a half. Who knows? It'll come eventually. We've been talking about it for months. Even before the deluxe was supposed to come out, we were saying we were going to do it. We'll do it eventually. I promise. I have so many thoughts on this album, but just the TLDR. We are so lucky to be alive at the same time as Ariana Grande, and I will leave you guys with that. Continuing through our Drew releases segment, we have one other track that we're going to talk about now, and a track that we'll talk about a little bit later, if you can kind of pick up what I'm putting down from the title. We had Kesha featuring T-Pain, Yippee-Ki-Yay. And like I said last week, recession pop is so back. I don't know if it's because Kesha debuted while I was in high school, which is like your formative years where your brain is developing. But something about hearing a Kesha track, especially when she puts the auto-tune and just like talking her shit on a track, it ignites something in me that makes me feel like I could run through a wall. Like, I have such a special place in my heart for Kesha. It's just, like I said, I think it's just those formative years where like my brain was trying to develop and I was like brain rotting myself with pop culture, and I was listening to Animal and Cannibal and like that EP and those albums, whatever, I forget how it fell, because I think Cannibal was technically a deluxe version of Animal, but it was a whole new album. I forget, to be honest, but regardless, I was running those albums into the ground, and now just like hearing a Kesha track with any bit of autotune, it just makes me feel so nostalgic. This is so much fun. I am so excited for Kesha's album. It comes out on the 4th of July, which is so much fun. And I feel like we're just going to have like a crazy fun recession pop summer. I mean, we have Mayhem that is like obviously out and like we're all loving it. We're going to get a Miley album in May. We're going to get Kesha in July. Like, I just feel like we're going to have a pop girl summer again, just in a whole different way. And I am so thrilled, loving this track from Kesha. Like I said, we have some more releases to chat about later in the show, but they kind of fall, those leaves fall where they will later. It'll make sense when we get there, but we do have a new release coming up this Thursday from Miss Miley Cyrus, the Woman of the Hour. We're getting the second song on the album, End of the World, coming out on April 3rd. This is actually a song that she sang at Chateau Marmont last year. Whenever she was doing those kind of like acoustic sessions, she did this song then really stripped back, and it was really beautiful, but we didn't know what was coming from it. And it appears that she's turned it into kind of like a pop track. It kind of feels like it could be the first lead single from the album that's like getting pushed to radio. It really sounds kind of radio friendly from what I'm hearing from this snippet. However, that comes out on Thursday. We will chat about it next week. And we also have a very exciting release. My girl, Rachel Chinariri, is dropping her Little House EP on Friday. We already have the one song, Can We Talk About Isaac, which I love. We talked about that a few weeks ago. So we'll chat about that EP next week. Very excited for that. And that wraps up our Drew releases. So we will chat about Miley and Rachel next week. And we'll chat about Miley in just a little while. Just hang tight right there. We have a few things to go over before then. And then we're going to give you guys a full deep dive into Miss Miley Cyrus. Moving right along into our moments from the week that were just too pop to handle, some pop culture rapid fire. I'm sure we've all heard by now, but Morgan Wallen is a giant loser. We all knew that. But if you did not know, he was the musical guest on SNL this weekend with host Mikey Madison, which that already is just like an interesting pair. Like, not that the SNL host and musical guest ever really correspond with each other, but like, thinking about the people who will be watching for Morgan Wallen and the people who are watching for Mikey Madison and just fans of SNL in general, it's not even a Venn diagram. Like, there is no overlap in those people to what I would imagine. So when I saw this announcement, I rolled my eyes because like, why are we giving Morgan Wallen a platform? And B, I was like, why are we putting Mikey Madison, who literally just won Best Actress at this year's Oscars, up with this asshole? However, he was a musical guest and he went on, he did his thing. Of course, he made a whole stink at the end of his performance and had like praised the Lord and blah, 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 whatever. And then at the end credits, when they're all saying their goodbyes and, the cast is on stage, they're all saying, thank you for watching. They usually all hug, they high five. They're literally on stage for maybe 30 seconds. It's during the credits. It is a very normal and like typical thing that happens during SNL. He decided to hug Mikey Madison and go along with his night and walk right off of camera, which is just so Such loser behavior. And this isn't his first time doing SNL. Like, he's done this before. Also, SNL is like a huge program. You know how it ends. And like, it's not, and his team tried to come out and be like, oh, he was just, he thought the show was over. So he was leaving. He was walking off camera. Like, you know where backstage is. Why are you walking into the audience? It just felt such like a loser response from his team, but also such like a loser way to end this major moment in anybody's career. Like, I don't care how far along you are in your career. I don't care how many times you've done it before. Performing on SNL is a huge moment. It really is like a bucket list thing for so many people. So for Morgan Wallen to do it twice is crazy. And also, like, knowing his past with SNL, they literally kicked him off the show in October of 2020 because I believe he was like out at a bar during COVID without a mask on and like kissing women, and he was just like not following COVID protocols. So it was like a big deal that they like canceled his musical performance. They ended up rebooking him for later that year in December. So he did go on in that year, but they like reprimanded him for not following COVID guidelines. And to even bring him back, I'm sure there was a contract or something that like he had to fulfill. And like, you know, they did it when things probably died down a little bit and when it was a little bit safer to bring somebody who was out parading around in 2020 without a mask on, which is just A, crazy to think about that time in our lives, and B, just like, if you're a public figure, if you're anybody, but especially a public figure like Morgan Wallen, who all eyes are on you, why are you acting the way that you act? So the fact that he's already had this kind of past with SNL and now he's coming back on, and I mean, we all know where he stands politically. And like, I know nobody on that cast agrees with him politically. So even if you look in the sign off, like they were all kind of standing back. Usually they're up a little further. They're all kind of crowding around him. And you could tell that like nobody wanted to be on that stage with him, which I don't blame them. But also like, yeah, you've said some fucked up shit about people who it affects people on that stage, people of color, people of the queer community. Like, you've said some things that offend everybody on that stage. So like, yeah, I wouldn't be up there hugging you either. However, be professional, act like a man and finish your segment and then leave. You had like 15 seconds left and you walked off. And not only did he walk off, he then took to his Instagram while he was on his plane and said, "Get me back to God's country." And then his team wants to come and say like nothing was going on, like he wasn't upset, nothing was wrong. Let's be serious. Like, come on. And it's just such loser behavior. Like, why are you throwing temper tantrums still? Like, did you not learn your lesson when you threw a chair off the roof of a bar in Nashville because you were mad that I believe it was his ex-wife or his ex-girlfriend was dating somebody? Like, did you not learn your lesson when you got caught saying the N-word on camera and people were up in arms? Like, how many times does Morgan Wallen need to be an asshole before we just stop giving him this platform? Same with like Kanye. Like, they need to be stopped. And the way that the media is just like continuing to feed this fire because they know it's going to sell and they know it's going to make a story. I'm like, we have got to like wake the fuck up and cut this shit out because it's getting insane. They also had Kenan Thompson go on like the news literally by Monday morning. He was on like morning talk shows talking about this. And Kenan Thompson is probably the most like neutral cast member, I would say. And he's been on the show for so long at this point. So it makes sense why they would send him to do this press regardless. I mean, they're not going to send Bowen Yang or Sarah or Chloe. Like, obviously, they're going to have a lot worse things to say. But the fact that they even had him doing like a press conference the next morning, I was like, come on. Clearly something went on behind the scenes, whether it was during the filming, whether it was during rehearsals, like something went down and they're really trying to pull the wool over our eyes. And I'm just... not that I want to know what happened, but I'm like, at least own up to it. Like, if you're going to act like a piece of shit and then have all of this happen, at least give us a little juice to squeeze from it. You know what I mean? Such bizarre behavior from a grown man who has a history of acting like a child. Moving on to some real-life rom-com news, Miss Sydney Sweeney attended Glen Powell's sister's wedding this weekend. That's a tongue twister. And it just so happens that she also called off her engagement last week. Now, if you go back and you think about the lore when they were, you know, promoting their movie and they had all of this energy on camera and everybody was like, are they a thing? Are they an item? And they had to like make statements saying they're not dating and they're not an item. They got really close during filming. Like, there was definitely, all eyes were on them at one point, and they kind of were, people were really gunning for them to be a couple. And Sydney was like, no, I'm engaged. Like, I am good. I'm set. And like, they kind of like put it to rest. For her to archive every photo of her and her fiance, or now ex-fiance, call off their wedding, and then show up to Glen Powell's sister's wedding 48 hours later, like literally I was like, this had to be planned before, right? Like you had to know you were going. And of course there's people are saying like she's just close with Glen, and Glen had other people he works with there and other friends, like John Stamos was there and like other people were there. So it could very well be that she was invited to this wedding regardless. It was just like really convenient timing that she called off her engagement the exact same week as Glen Powell's sister's wedding. And she showed up to the wedding. Sydney Sweeney is just gorgeous. She's going to look hot wherever she goes. But that dress, like, yes, it was blue, but like, oh, damn, never seen that color blue, bitch. You don't wear that to a wedding. It looked like it was white. I was like, what are you doing? So definitely, Sydney Sweeney's going to pull some heads in her room. You know, she's going to make some head turn whenever because she's just like stunning. And I'm sure her energy is just like fabulous and walks into a room and everybody feels her energy. Not only that, she also is now wearing pretty much a white dress, and there's all of these rumors and everything going on about her and her fiance calling off their wedding this week. Like, it was a crazy time for her to show up to a wedding. However, she was there, and of course now all these rumors are swirling, but no other than Glen Powell's mom spoke to the Daily Mail and told them that nothing is going on. They are just friends. And now Glen Powell's mom is fascinating to me. If you remember a few months ago, I was talking about that story where they hosted that Glen Powell lookalike contest in Austin, and his mom was one of the judges. So she's clearly like very hands-on in his life, which isn't a bad thing. Like, obviously, like, she's showing up for her son and like being a great mother, but like, why is she's giving like protective boy mom and like is giving mama's boy, especially knowing that Glen Powell, like, to our knowledge, doesn't really date much. Like, he seems kind of like he would be that like stereotypical mama's boy. And she's kind of just like feeding into that narrative. Like, you're hosting your son's lookalike contest. Now you're speaking to the Daily Mail about this. Like, it just seemed very strange. And this is obviously, I don't have any beef with Glen Powell's mom. I could actually care less about the woman, but it's just fascinating. But she said they're definitely not together. It was just like she was there with her friend. She's apparently really close friends with the entire family. And she said there was nothing going on behind closed doors. Then they asked her, will they date? Is there anything in the future? And she said that it's none of my business. I just want what's best for everybody. I want somebody who loves him unconditionally and who he loves unconditionally, who they take care of each other and live happily ever after. So who knows where they stand? I just thought this was like crazy behavior on many parts, like calling off your engagement and showing up to the wedding of your ex co-star sister, who you were heavily rumored to be having an affair with said ex-fiance. It just felt insane. And like, even when the movie was coming out, I remember we were talking about it and I was like, this really does feel like what's happening in the movie. Like, it was truly like a rom-com come to life. That was like a tongue twister. Well, rom-com come to life. But it was, yeah, I don't know. I've got my eyes on these two. And it's so funny because over the weekend, I was chatting with my friends and we were saying like, what's going on with them? Because like, she's archiving all of these photos and like everything's going on there. Like, what's going on with her and Glen? Like, is there a pulse check? And I was like, I don't think anything's going on truly. Like, I think it is really just like not something that's going to happen. It was just like a blip in time. And then these photos come out literally the next day. I was like, did we manifest this? Because that's been happening. I don't know if you guys have been noticing, if you follow me on Instagram, a lot of things that I've been saying on the podcast have been either coming true or like coming to fruition in the news. Literally last week, I did that whole spiel about how I Feel Loved by Donna Summers is like probably one of the greatest songs ever written and just feels like a song that could have been released in any decade. And 2 or 3 days later, the Billboard released a whole article saying how I Feel Love is like the best dance pop song to ever be released. I was like, this is not a coincidence, because it's not like Donna Summers was like in the news or anything. And I was just bringing her up because we were talking about pop Bibles and like, how can you talk about a pop Bible without Donna Summers and I Feel Love? And I was just like, that's really weird. And I've just had a few other instances where I'm like, this is something I have talked about on the show or predicted, and it's been coming true. And now it's happening off the mic. So I'm like, what is going on? What energy am I putting out there that's like manifesting these things to come true? I don't know. You know, maybe I'll keep it up. Maybe I'll manifest some other things for myself. If you need something, let me know. Maybe I can help manifest for you as well. We will see what happens there. And that actually wraps up our moments from the week that were just too pop to handle. I only had 2 this week because the meat of the show this week is quite meaty. There's a lot to get into. I have a lot of thoughts, a lot of commentary, because the woman of the hour is Miss Miley Cyrus. And now, if you know me or you've been listening for a while, you guys know Miley is one of my favorite artists of all time. I love her. I adore her. I have met her a bunch of times. I've seen her in concert. I think she might be the artist I've seen the most in concert, honestly. It's between her and the Jonas Brothers. So kind of parallels. And that's in the, the Disney kid growing up thing. So, but I think Miley's up there if she's not my most seen person in concert. I love her. I adore her. She is truly one of my favorite artists of all time. And she's an artist she's like a once in a lifetime kind of artist, because you'll see as we kind of go through this episode, like she's just somebody who's ever changing. And I think that's what keeps her so interesting and fun to be a fan of. But the main, what really tipped off and inspired the topic this week is I talked about it last week, but she is getting ready for her album release for Something Beautiful, which comes out May 30th. And she released a teaser last week. And then to our surprise, Monday morning, bright and early, she released the prelude for the album, which is like spoken word over a really cool instrumental. And then she announced that at noon on Monday, she was releasing the title track to the album, which is the first song on the album after the prelude, and that it would be coming out at noon with the whole like official video for it. So we were like, okay, whoa, we are getting a full, I don't know if it's like a single as far as like going out to, radio or whatever. Like you never really know with Miley. She kind of does whatever she wants, which is a theme that we'll see throughout this episode. But we got the prelude and then we got the title track. And then we found out that we're getting another song from her this Thursday. We're getting the third track, which is, I don't know if we're getting a single every week. I don't know how she's doing it, but as soon as I watched this, I was like, oh, this is going to be an album for the books. Like she is really going off the beaten path of what she's used to doing. And I instantly was like, I need to do a deep dive on her album rollouts in the past as this is starting, because we're already seeing something so unique and different and quite literally just experimental is the best way to use it. The best word to describe it, excuse me. So I did this a few weeks ago. If you guys remember, it was Lady Gaga's Causing Mayhem. And what I did was I went through an entire kind of analysis of her album rollouts and like what was going on in her life and what was going on in kind of pop culture surrounding her album releases. And I got really good feedback on that episode. A lot of people told me they really liked it, thought it was really fun to just like do a deep dive there. And like I said, we're going to dive into Miss Miley Cyrus and all of her album endeavors. And because she really is, like I said, a once in a lifetime pop star. We've seen such crazy success and just like the things that I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just start at the top and we will go into it. But so like I said, we got the prelude and the title track of Something Beautiful this week. And the prelude is kind of haunting. It's very like, it has this really cool instrumental behind it. And she's just kind of giving us this premise of the album. And then we go into Something Beautiful. And this song explores so many different sounds and so many different genres. It kind of starts with like a smoother, almost like a jazzy kind of sound. And then it quite literally explodes into this like pop rock opera vibe that she's going for. This theatrical kind of like over the top, really takes a sharp turn left and just like completely switches the sound. And then it cools back down into this like jazzy kind of verse. So like I said, experimental is really the only word I can think of when talking about this song and assuming what the whole album's going to allude to. And it really got me thinking that like Miley has really dipped her toes into almost every genre out there. I mean, she's done pop, she's done rock, she's done country, she's had some elements of hip hop in her music. Like she doesn't like to be kept in a box sonically and as a human being, which I will get into in a little bit. And I was like, this album really feels like it's going to be a blend of everything she's done and all the music that she loves in her life and kind of just like put together into one big, people are calling it like her magnum opus album. Obviously, it's hard to say that before the album comes out. But I do think this album is going to be a really big mark in Miley's career. And listening to Something Beautiful in the prelude and like watching the visuals, I do think this is going to be an album that's like best consumed as a whole body of work. I really like the sound of it so far and I'm really into this experimental vibe, but I do think once we get the entire project, it'll make a lot more sense. And I'm really excited to see like where she goes with this because as we know, Miley kind of keeps us on her toes. She doesn't like to stay in one lane. And that's kind of what inspired this whole episode. So we're diving into Miley's entire career and not just the chart data, because you guys know I always preach like the charts matter, but do they really matter? We're going to dive into obviously the success of the album and like the rollout of the album and how the album kind of plays into her career as she goes, but also just like what was going on with Miley at that time. Because like I said, I've been a fan of Miley since the beginning. I watched the premiere episode of Hannah Montana the night that it came out. Like I have been riding with this girl since day one. So it's something that I've also lived which is kind of similar to like when I was doing the Lady Gaga one. It was like things that I have lived through. So it was really fun to kind of go through and take a trip down memory lane and just like really be like, whoa, we have really seen so many different sides of artists. So with that, let's take it back to 2006. So obviously this is a dive into Miley's career, but without Hannah Montana, there would be no Miley Cyrus. So before Miley even puts out any of her solo music, Hannah Montana had already premiered a year prior. It was the highest rating premiere episode in the history of Disney Channel as of 2006. The album for Hannah Montana debuted at number 1. It was the first television show soundtrack to reach the top of the chart. Like, Hannah Montana hit the world and truly took the world by storm. It was such a cultural reset for Disney Channel, for pop music. It was such a crazy phenomenon just in that first season, and it just kept going up from there. And this is kind of where we get into Miley Cyrus as a separate being from Hannah Montana. So the second season of Hannah Montana comes out and they get ready to release the album for the season, which is Hannah Montana 2 / Meet Miley Cyrus. It was this double disc album, the first one being of Hannah Montana season 2 songs and the other side being of Miley Cyrus's debut album, which this is kind of our first introduction to Miley Cyrus, not Miley Stewart. And it was kind of a test run of how people would perceive Miley without Hannah and how it kind of it was trying to create this phenomenon off screen, kind of similar to what Miley was on Hannah Montana, living this double life. They were kind of trying to create Hannah Montana in one universe and then Miley Cyrus as a pop star in another. And my God, did it work. The album went on to debut at number 1 on the US Billboard 200, making her the 7th solo artist to chart at number 1 on the Billboard 200 under the age of 18. And what's interesting to me about this is they obviously had lead singles for Hannah, but Miley didn't get a lead single from this album until December, which is 6 months after the album came out. It dropped in June. So they finally gave Miley a lead single from Meet Miley Cyrus, which was See You Again. And even that song, looking back at it, like while I was doing my research for this episode, I was listening to all of these albums and these songs and kind of just like taking a trip down memory lane. And when you look at what Hannah Montana was putting out at that time, if we're talking about this fictional character, but you know, Hannah Montana was treated in the world as a artist. You know, Hannah Montana was getting a number 1 album. It wasn't a Miley Cyrus album. It was a Hannah Montana one. So to see Miley Cyrus releasing songs that weren't this like bubblegum pop kind of vibe that you would expect. See You Again's kind of like a dancey pop kind of vibe. And then she had Start All Over, which kind of had a little rock kind of vibe to it. Not necessarily like rock, you know, we're not talking about like Kiss and AC/DC, but it had a little more of like an edge to it than Hannah Montana would put out. So it definitely was kind of creating this new persona that was Miley Cyrus versus Miley Stewart. And then from that album and the success of it, she ended up going on tour, which the single See You Again kind of was promoting Miley Cyrus as one of the headliners on the tour, which is the Best of Both Worlds tour. Hannah Montana, Miley Cyrus, and the Jonas Brothers were opening. And this tour was such a phenomenon. Like, just thinking back, like I tried so hard to get tickets because, like I said, Miley and the Jonas Brothers are the two artists that I would say I've probably seen the most. And I mean, that was like my dream show. I mean, if you were 12 years old in the year 2007, you were dying for tickets to the Best of Both Worlds tour. They had dads running in heels outside the venue to try to get these tickets. Like, it was such a crazy phenomenon. It ended up becoming one of the highest scalped shows of that year. And it actually ended up creating some laws in certain states about ticket resellers, which is crazy because we're still dealing with this shit today. And this is back in 2007. But it was one of those first really big scalped events. We were seeing people buying these tickets and selling them on eBay, on StubHub for like 3, 4, 5 times the price. It was nearly impossible to get into this show. And of course, like I said, the Jonas Brothers were opening and there was all this hype around Miley and Nick because they were rumored to be dating and they kind of confirmed it while they were on tour. So there was all the excitement of that because it was like our generation's first pop stars having this relationship. It was like Justin and Britney in the early 2000s. Like, it was this kind of phenomenon with the two of them where everybody was so invested almost, you know, and we wanted to know what was going on. And it was just like the hottest ticket in town. And then since so many people wanted to go, they ended up turning it into a 3D concert film, which when you look back at it, she wasn't the first person to ever do a concert film, of course. But in that time, she was kind of one of the first artists to do it around that time. And it created this new phenomenon. The Jonas Brothers did it with the Burning Up tour. Then Katy Perry did it with the California Dreams tour. Justin Bieber did it with Never Say Never. It kind of created this new trend of doing 3D movies for your concerts and having a theatrical release. There were tons of people doing live live, like filmed concerts and going to DVD. I mean, Beyonce, Lady Gaga, like they were doing documentaries about their shows, but doing a full 3D concert, the Glee cast did it, like doing a full 3D movie theatrical release for your concert kind of became a thing because of the Best of Both Worlds tour. And it just kind of showed that like Miley really had her pulse on what was happening and what was trending, and people were watching her to make their next move. She really was the it girl on and off screen. So we get this whole Hannah moment, this crazy, phenomenon with Best of Both Worlds. And then we move into 2008 and we get the first Miley Cyrus album that isn't affiliated with a Hannah album, which is Breakout. She said for this album that my new songs have a little bit more of a different vibe. I finally got to kind of step out and do exactly what kind of sound I wanted to do. In my last record, I had to introduce myself. And now that people already know who I am and know a little bit about me, this is just, getting to know me personally. And like I said, it was really our first project of Miley's without a project tied to it. So it was really all eyes on Miley at this point without leaning on Hannah as like a crutch, if that makes sense. And I actually remember I went to the Today Show the day that the album came out because she did a performance, which is really aging myself that I was at the Today Show in 2008. But, and I remember the interviewer asking, they were like, last time you were here as Hannah Montana, and there were so many people that showed up. Did you think this many people were going to show up just for Miley? And she was like, honestly, no. Like, I did not expect this turnout for somebody who isn't Hannah Montana. So it was really a big moment for not just the music world and what was to come as Miley Cyrus as a pop star, but also for Miley as a, she would have, what was she, 16 at that point? Like she was 16 years old and she was like, wow, people want to come see me, not just the character I'm playing. So it had to be a weird kind of mind game in that sense as well. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but just kind of rewinding to the lead single for this album, it was 7 Things. And now this song, like I said, Miley and Nick were such a hot ticket item. Like everybody was watching them. Everybody wanted to know about their relationship. So when 7 Things dropped and Miley was holding a scribbled out photo of Nick Jonas and holding his diabetes dog tag, the world stopped. Like I remember watching this music video for the first time and literally being like, no, the fuck she did not. Like it was kind of showing us this like cheeky kind of rebellious side to Miley Cyrus that we hadn't seen yet, which is so funny to call that rebellious, knowing what was to come with bangers and dead pets. And like, this was clearly nothing scraping the surface compared to what was to come. But in the moment, 7 Things and Miley really kind of like reminding us that like, hey, me and Nick are over and here's the 7 things I hate about him. Like it was a moment. And so it kind of really gave this build up to the rest of this album. And let's not forget the Teen Choice Award performance of this song where she goes and like cuddles up next to Selena, who was also dating Nick Jonas at the time or had dated Nick Jonas. Like she really was showing us this kind of like, I don't care, I'm gonna like laugh in your face kind of moment. Like I'm Miley Cyrus and I'm gonna do whatever I want kind of vibe. And she was kind of setting the scene for creating a monster that none of us ever could have predicted. And I say that in the most loving way possible, but she really was kind of giving us a glimpse into like, I'm going to do whatever I want. You cannot keep me in a box. So in the same month that 7 Things comes out, we also get those infamous Annie Leibovitz Vanity Fair photos, which another moment that I remember being where I was when those photos dropped, because it was truly unbelievable. The uproar that people had over these photos. If by chance you don't know what I'm talking about, is a photo of Miley in the cover of Vanity Fair. She's wearing nothing but like a sheet covering her chest and looking over her shoulder. These photos were everywhere. And now you have to think, it's 2008. The internet is really like taking off in sense of like social media. MySpace is huge. Facebook is getting big. Twitter is becoming like a bigger thing. Like this was the first time where things were really hitting the news and like going viral almost to a sense. Like obviously in the past we had like Britney, we had Lindsay, we had Paris. We would learn about it through TV and there were gossip blogs and things like that, but it wasn't to the level in which everybody was sharing everything yet. And this was kind of the beginning of that era. So these photos of Miley Cyrus, who is like the Disney darling, Hannah Montana child star dropping, and they're a little risque, truly broke the internet. It was such a crazy time. And like she had to issue an apology and like she had to say like, oh, she didn't know what she was getting herself into. Like it was such a crazy time to be just like a pop culture fan, but especially like a young kid being a Miley Cyrus fan and like your parents being like, oh, did you see what Miley did? And like you almost felt like you were in trouble for being a fan of Miley at this point because she was kind of on this cusp of rebellion, but like I said, we had no idea what we were in store for at that point. Breakout comes out, ends up peaking at number 1, making her the third artist in history under 18 to have 2 number 1s as a solo artist. And at this point, you really could not escape Miley. Like, she was truly everywhere. She was working like a horse. Like, she was literally at a gig, at a show, at a signing, doing this, doing that. At the same time as all of this is going on, she's also filming Hannah Montana the movie, which is only the second theatrical release of a Disney Channel original TV show that Disney Channel has ever done. So huge eyes on this project. The first one being Lizzie McGuire, by the way, which was a huge moment for Disney Channel. So knowing that this was like the second Disney Channel original series getting a theatrical release was already huge. And granted, this was only 2 years into the release of Hannah Montana. So clearly they knew this was a huge project on their hands, and like there was so much that could come from what Hannah Montana had to offer. So Miley is filming, also at the same time, filming the TV show, filming Hannah Montana the movie, recording her album. She releases it, and it's like there's kind of no shock to me that like she wanted to end up shaking this Disney image, because look at the way that she was working at 16 years old. Like, of course, yeah, she was living the life and living the dream and doing all of these things, but like no shit, she ended up rebelling and wanting to like shake this image because she was literally a workhorse. It was non-stop. So as 2008 goes on, she releases her album and continues the movies and the projects and whatever. March comes around, 2009, and she releases Miles to Go, which when you think about the fact that like Miley Cyrus was writing an autobiography at 17, it's so funny, but it just goes to show that like they were really squeezing her for any story they could. They were like, take everything you've experienced in the last 3 years and tie it to your childhood and write a book about it. Like, what does a 17-year-old have to write a autobiography about? Granted, I read every single page of it. I have 2 copies of it. I still have it under my bed. And yes, the Prince Charming chapter is bookmarked and highlighted in both copies. But like, what did a 17-year-old have to be saying in an autobiography? Beats me. Looking back at this now as like an almost 30-year-old and like thinking about all the things that Miley was doing at this age, it is unbelievable. So March, the book comes out. April 2009, Hannah Montana, the movie comes out, grossing $155 million worldwide. It was only a $30 million production budget, which is an unreal margin. Also at this time, The Climb gets released as a single. She performs it on like American Idol, which is like the biggest show at the moment. And you know, she's really on this up and up as like becoming Miley Cyrus and not separating from Hannah Montana, but just kind of establishing 2 different people. You know, it wasn't just, oh, that's Miley who is Hannah Montana. She's Hannah Montana, but she's also Miley Cyrus. Like I said, we are in this era of social media, and she's posting on YouTube, she's posting on Twitter, and she's Disney's darling, but she's kind of leaning into this like, not promiscuous, I don't want to say that, but this more like edgy kind of vibe online. And we're really starting to see Miley's personality come out. She's doing this web show with her best friend Mandy, the Miley and Mandy show. Then Miley and Mandy are feuding with Demi and Selena, and it's the biggest thing on the internet. Miley was one of the most followed people on Twitter within like a few months of her creating her account. Like, it was such a big deal. Miley was on Twitter. She was posting nonstop. If you were on Twitter back in the day when we were like texting 40404, you know that Miley Cyrus was posting more than anybody in the world on that app. She was telling us every single thing going on in her life. And while all of this is going on, she is release her EP, The Time of Our Lives, which we'll get into in just a moment. And the lead single from the song comes out a few weeks before the EP comes out, and it is no other than Party in the USA, which everybody knows that song is probably Miley's most recognizable song, and it is just taking over, which is so funny because we'll get into Time of Our Lives in just a second, but just thinking about Time of Our Lives and Party in the USA in the retrospect of Miley's career, hold that thought, we'll get to it in a second. From that song, we get the Teen Choice Award performance heard around the world. She comes out of the trailer, she's like, has her leg propped up. Everybody was like, oh, this child is spreading her legs on TV. She was wearing these little short shorts. She was wearing this like fur vest, kind of like Kesha, grungy kind of vibes. Like, she was definitely not, this was not Hannah anymore. This was not the Miley we were seeing on Disney Channel. This was a different woman who was fully just like establishing herself as her own being. And then, of course, she hops up on the ice cream cart, grabs onto the pole, crouches down on it, and the world goes nuts. Now you have to remember, this is like Disney Channel's darling. So for the biggest teen star in the world to be doing this was crazy. Looking back at it now, it really wasn't that big of a deal. But at the time, this was like Britney, Madonna, Christina kissing level news. This was like Lady Gaga paparazzi hanging from the ceiling news. Like this was crazy. People were going nuts. It was to that level of the Annie Leibovitz shoot where people were like, she needs to apologize. She shouldn't be acting like this. And like, in retrospect, sure. But when you put a 15-year-old in the limelight and now she is growing up and becoming a woman, what do you think she's going to do? Act like a polished little doll the entire time? Let's get serious. And like I said, while this is going on, she's also releasing the Time of Our Lives EP. She's also filming the last song over the summer, which is where she unfortunately ends up meeting Liam Hemsworth, which we'll get into eventually. She just has so much going on. All eyes are on her. Like I said, she has the criticism from this Teen Choice Awards performance, and then it leads up to her deleting her Twitter. And now, to the average person, hearing the words Miley Cyrus deleted her Twitter probably meant nothing to them at the time. But if you were on Twitter and online at that time, you knew that Miley Cyrus deleting her Twitter was the biggest deal in the world. And not only was it a big deal because of her being so active on Twitter, she released an entire iMovie rap to announce that she's deleting the rap. And I honestly could probably recite it back to you right now. I haven't heard this rap in years, but I literally, like, I'm hearing it now. Yeah, the rumors are true. I deleted my Twitter. Yeah, can you believe it? I got to 2 million. Then I said adios. I had to say goodbye. And this little rap is to tell my fans why. Yeah, like I could keep going. It wasn't because my friends told me to. Y'all know very well that's not what I'm gonna do. You get it. It was burned into my brain. It was literally such a huge moment. Not just in like my friend group, it was a huge moment all over the internet. The fact that she made a whole rap to announce that she was deleting her Twitter, the fact that she just deleted her Twitter in general, it was truly like, it was headline news because it was Miley Cyrus. Like she was who everybody was looking at. She had all eyes on her at all moments, and she deleted her Twitter. She was like, I'm done, I am out. But again, it was kind of showing us this rebellious side of Miley, and we're really getting a look into her personality off the screen, out of the studio, and who she was like as a human being, if that makes sense. So like I said, she dropped the Time of Our Lives EP that same year. It was a collaboration EP for her Miley and Max line at Walmart, and it opened with a cover of Ashley Simpson's Kicking and Screaming, which, listening to that track and looking at the music she had released at that time, it was this real rock, like guitar forward, different sound for Miley. Of course, the big song that comes out of it is When I Look at You and Party in the USA, but listening to that EP and like hearing that sound and then just like going into the Party in the USA and Time of Our Lives, the title track of the EP, and knowing Miley had little to no involvement, it kind of should have been no shock that she was really on this different path of where she wanted to go with her sound. But of course, in that time, everybody just wanted to know, what was the single? What was she doing? Like, it wasn't about her artistry at that point, which is what I think ended up blossoming into what we get later in her career with bangers, with Dead Pets, which we'll get there in a moment. This album, ends up kicking off the Wonderworld tour, which was a huge 180 in Miley's performance styles. I mean, the only other tour she had done was Best of Both Worlds, which was Hannah Montana and the Jonas Brothers and Miley. So it was very Disney, very family friendly, very, had to be kind of like Disney polished. She was doing whatever she wanted on this tour. She was flying around on a motorcycle. She was flying around in basically like a wedding dress, it looked like, for fly on the wall, like over the crowd. The dancers were like being a little provocative. And of course, she was getting news articles written about how she was dancing on stage and what she was wearing. And everybody was just ridiculing her for everything she did. But she did not give a fuck. It was such a power move in her part that she was at this time, 18, 19. And she was like, I'm going to do what I want. And I'm going to do it kicking and screaming. Not to, quote the opening track, but it is what it is. Art imitates life. And this actually, like I said in the Best of Both Worlds tour, where it was so heavily scalped, they actually switched this entire tour to paperless to try to avoid people scalping these tickets. So you couldn't get physical tickets. You had to like show up with your credit card and the ID when you got to the door, which made it so much harder, obviously, for scalpers to scalp these tickets. I did go to this tour. I didn't go to Best of Both Worlds, but I did go to Wonderworld. it was unreal. I remember having like sitting there in awe watching this show live because I was like, this is unbelievable. This is literally Miley Cyrus, the biggest pop star in the world right now. And she was up there. She was like I said, the Disney darling. And she was up there being so edgy and kind of like doing whatever she wanted. It was like a formative night in my life, not gonna lie. It was a big moment for like what I was to come into and like loving concerts and pop music and pop culture. Like it was kind of a shift in that sense. So that takes us through the end of 2009. Beginning of 2010, she releases the last song in theaters. Like I said, obviously her and Liam Hemsworth at this point are dating, which he's just like a wet dog to me. Like he's extra weight, he's extra baggage. I never liked him, to be completely honest. And I mean, we all know how the story goes, but it'll intertwine as we go on. Later that year, she ends up releasing the lead single to her next album, Can't Be Tamed, and another world stop moment. This was just like what Miley was doing at this point. She was really trying to make the world talk about her. It felt like she was doing whatever she wanted. And when the Can't Be Tamed music video came out, it was another one of those moments where they were like, she shouldn't be acting like this. Everybody was telling her how she should be acting and how she should be, pursuing her music career. And she just kept pushing the buttons. And like, we all know where it goes after Can't Be Tamed with bangers. Like she kept pushing the buttons. And honestly, we love to see it. So Can't Be Tamed comes out. I actually literally remember this premiered on like E! News or something. It was like after school, and I wouldn't have gotten home in time to watch it if I took the bus. So I walked home from school because I could walk home faster than the bus would get me, which I know doesn't make sense, but just follow me. I literally walked home from school so I could make sure I was home in time to watch the Can't Be Tamed music video premiere because it was that serious to me, and I'm so glad that I did. This is also her final album with Hollywood Records, which is huge because it's her final like hurrah with a Disney record label. So she's kind of cutting those ties and is able to go into it, do whatever she wants with the next album. This album ends up debuting at number 3 on the US Billboard 200 chart. And this kind of felt like a child of Britney's Blackout. It kind of felt like her kind of taking that like dance electro pop sound that Britney was giving us with Blackout 3 years prior. And we know Britney is such an inspiration to Miley always in her career. And so many people compare the two of them throughout their career. And I think looking at Miley's discography and just like sound wise, I would classify Can't Be Tamed as her Blackout because it really was. It was this new sound for her that was like electric. It was dancey. It was like just a whole different sound. I love this album. It's one of my favorite Miley albums. And it really was like a whole new change of sound for her. And Miley and I are 3 years apart. So like I was not far behind her growing up, like as far as age. So like watching somebody just a few years older than me kind of going through these same motions of like growing up and figuring out who you are, whatever, like hearing the Can't Be Tamed album was a moment for me because I was like, you're going into high school, you're trying to like figure out who you are, and like watching Miley like do this whole kind of reinvention thing. It was huge. Like it was a big, you go into high school, you're like, I'm a badass. I'm going to high school. I'm too cool for school. Like, and seeing Miley do it, it was like, oh, cool. Like she can kind of reinvent herself. She can do whatever she wants. So can I. So it was kind of like there was a lot of parallels I felt like with friends who all of us who liked Miley and like watching her kind of evolve. It was like a cool age to be at in that, in that time of my life, if that, not to quote the EP, but hey, art imitates life. When this came out, she said, I want to do my last pop record. I'm working on a record right now, and I kind of want this to be my last record for a little while and be able to take a break and just get all the types of music that I really love. My favorite styles, because in a few years, as I grow up, so will my fans, and I won't have to focus on that as much. And I'll be able to have more of the sound of the music that I'm into. God, did we not know what was in store. But like you said, my fans are going to grow up. I'm going to grow up. So there's going to be we're going to want a new sound. We're going to want to evolve and change. And I think she had such a good headspace in that sense. Like she was really able to understand that like I'm growing up and I'm changing. I can't be putting out these poppy little songs for everybody all the time. I want to experiment. I want to do new things. She went on to do the Gypsy Heart Tour in South America. And my God, I feel like the Gypsy Heart Tour is such like a sensitive subject for the US Miley fans because like we all are like, God damn it, I cannot believe we did not get a tour for Can't Be Tamed. But granted, we get everything else, so it's fine. But I would have killed to have seen the Gypsy Heart Tour. It was also, that tour was when she came back to Twitter. I remember the Gypsy Heart Tour account got created and it would like be signed MC. So it was like her kind of like coming back to the app or the website. And then she finally recreated at Miley Cyrus not too long after that. So this was kind of like a new evolution for Miley. We went like a whole year and a half without her on Twitter. And then she finally came back. And like she said, she wanted to take a break from music and kind of dive into other projects. So 2011, 2002, she kind of becomes this like Tumblr fashion it girl. She was really like spearheading the street style movement. She was everywhere she went, she was getting photographed and she was wearing these flannels. She always had the bun. Oh my God. Miley's bun was such a moment. Oh my God. She was wearing like the cool cutoff shorts and she had the studded phone cases, the big necklaces. Like she was really leaning into this like boho grungy kind of chic look. And like every single outfit she wore, everybody was running to the store to get that outfit. Like she was who people were looking at as a fashion icon. And like you would go walk around Soho and everybody was dressed like Miley Cyrus. Like it was such a moment for her, which was so cool because she was coming out of this Disney Channel phase. Hannah Montana had just wrapped at the beginning of 2011 and like she was kind of just becoming Miley. So to see people loving Miley for Miley still really kind of spoke to the impact that she had on everybody in culture. She dipped into her more acting. She did LOL with Demi Moore, So Undercover. She started the Backyard Sessions, which really I feel like skyrocketed her into like a new level of appreciation musically. I feel like a lot of people started taking her a lot more seriously when they heard her vocal abilities. I mean, she did Jolene and all of these covers she was doing just like stripped back. People were like, oh, she's not just like a bubblegum pop star who was on Disney and now is like doing her thing. Like she actually has such a talent and such a voice on her. And it kind of opened up the world to a new version of Miley. And we kind of see Miley going back to the stripped back sound and version of her a lot through her career. I think where she really feels safe and like she knows like, hey, that's something I feel comfortable doing. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. While all this is happening, she's on and off again with Liam. They get engaged, they call it off, they get back together. And then, because this is what Miley does best, another moment where the world stops. She posts a photo on Twitter of her with her hair in a bun with scissors underneath it, and she cuts her hair. And she was known for her hair. Everybody loved Miley's hair. It was like long and full. She had these crazy extensions in it all the times and they always looked perfect. Like her hair was, it was such a thing. And then she cut it all off and it was the beginning of the Bangers era, which we all know and I personally love. Fast forward to June 2013, we get the lead single from Bangers, We Can't Stop. It is our first taste of this Bangers era. Her tongue was out, she was showing skin, she was singing about drugs and having sex, shaking ass, and just completely like shaking this Disney character as hard as she possibly could. She was like, get Hannah Montana as far away from me as possible. And it worked. It definitely worked. She went on to do another performance heard around the world, the VMAs with Robin Thicke. She came out in that nude bodysuit. She twerked on the bear, the foam finger. Like she was really, this is why I call Bangers a pop Bible last week, because it was there were just so many cultural impacts that it had. Whether it was from the songs, the visuals, the performances, like it was crazy. It was such a crazy era to be a Miley fan too, because half the world hated her and the other half loved her. There was really no in between. It was either you got it or you didn't get it. So she ends up dropping the album in September of that year. It became her 5th #1 album on the US Billboard 200 chart, and it was the 3rd highest opening week for a female in 2013. It was crazy. It was like her first time back in the public eye for music. And like I said, she was really breaking from this Disney persona. And it was in she went on a new label. She had a new haircut. She was like really doing everything she could to be like, I am Miley Cyrus. That Hannah Montana bitch is dead. She was literally wearing R.I.P. Hannah Montana, which actually one of my friends on Twitter, Zach, I don't know if he listens. Sometimes he likes my thing. So if you're listening to this, Zach, we all know R.I.P. Hannah Montana was born from you. It was such an iconic moment. She was really just like fully diving into what it meant to completely shed an old skin and move into something else. It made people feel uncomfortable. It made people talk. It made people like question what was going on. And like I said, it was this rebellious moment. And then we get Wrecking Ball as the second single, and it becomes her first #1 hit. It broke the record for the most views in 24 hours at the time. And it was just this. It was like nobody could escape Miley, but it wasn't in the same way where she was on, it was Hannah Montana on a t-shirt, on a purse, on a chapstick, on a makeup bag. Like it was now Miley was everywhere because she was being so, I hate to say crazy and not in a negative way, but she was being so outlandish. I ate every second of it up. I absolutely loved the Bangers era. I think it might be my favorite Miley era just because it was such like a monumental time in my life. I was graduating high school and it was that whole like transition from high school to college, and I was just like dealing with a lot of personal things at that time. So it really was an era that I leaned on in a sense of like finding myself, if that makes sense. It was really just and I mean, don't even get me started on like the internet culture around it, because people were leaking songs from it left and right. All of these these B-side tracks were showing up on Tumblr. There was like somebody trying to hack her iCloud, and they leaked all of these photos, and we got all of these unreleased Bangers photos and singles. I mean, there was like Last Goodbye, which I love. I have that song on my phone still, like from my iTunes back in the day, and I listen to it very often. It's such a good unreleased track. Should I be talking about listening to unreleased music? I don't know. Whatever. There was Nightmare, which I mean, such a good song. I was actually talking to my friend Mike. If you're listening to this, hello. We were talking about it today and how like this song was it's such a good song. And the fact that she hasn't done anything with it yet, like it could fit really so many of the genres that we've had since Bangers, and it just kind of has like sat in the vault. There was also Pretty Girls, which ended up being a tour interlude, and then there was Doctor, which she ended up revamping and releasing last year, which was Doctor Work It Out, that single she put out with Pharrell. Like there's so much lore in the Bangers era, and so many like if you were there, there was so much happening in the Miley fandom and in that like circle online. It was a wild time to be online. Moving into 2014, she goes on the Banger Tour, obviously making headlines throughout. People were saying it was so outlandish. She's sliding down on a tongue. Her outfits are crazy. She's saying crazy shit. She's smoking on stage. People could not grasp this new image she was going. I could not get enough of the Bangers Tour. I went to 8 Bangers Tour shows because I could not get enough. Like I said, I loved the Bangers era. It was truly just I felt it was such a freeing kind of album, because it was, again, that time of my life where I was graduating high school to college. I was going through personal things. I had like stuff going on. I was like newly out of the closet. So it was like this whole new, like, oh my God, I can explore this different side of me I've never explored before, and I can have fun, and I can dance, and I can do whatever. And it was just like this like rebellious side. Not that I was doing anything rebellious, like I wasn't doing anything crazy, but like it just was like this really, it came out in a time in my life, and I think a lot of her fans' lives, because we were all like that same age, where we all were like in this transitional period. And this kind of gave us that idea of like, it's okay to be whoever you want kind of thing, not to get like sappy or whatever, but it was like a kind of like a reassurance to like, hey, you can do whatever and kind of like shift who you want to be and figure it out as you go, because that's exactly what Miley was doing. She also had so much going on in her personal life. I mean, Floyd, her dog, died. I was actually at the show the day after he passed away, and like she was inconsolable on stage, and I was front row. I remember literally watching the Floyd balloon blow up and her coming out on stage and just collapsing onto it, literally front row. I was like, this is insane. She also did a sound check that day, and she cried through the whole thing, which totally understandable. But like she was going through so much in the personal sense of her life and in the public eye. Like it had to be a crazy time, which kind of makes sense as to where we go next in the Miley landscape. She did end up going back to the backyard sessions. Like I said, she kind of always goes back to that stripped back sound when she kind of needs to, and when she needs to revisit it. But it came out in tandem with her Happy Hippie Foundation, which she was kind of showing this new side to her, and she was opening up about her sexuality, and she was really helping the trans and queer youth, which is such a great way to use your voice. And then she hosts the 2015 VMAs, and we get a surprise performance of a new song called Do It with an ensemble of drag queens, and it was truly the definition of experimental. Like it was a sound we had never heard from her before, and a sound we weren't really hearing in the mainstream before. It was this like psychedelic kind of just like this crazy, not even pop. I don't even know what genre to call it. It was just this like psychedelic track. And we were like, what is happening right now? And at the end of the performance, she announces her next album, Miley Cyrus and Her Dead Pets, is now live on SoundCloud because the label would not put it out. And it was this psychedelic rock album that she worked with the lead singer of the Flaming Lips on, which makes sense when you listen to the Flaming Lips and then listen to Miley. And I think she just needed to pour her creative energy into something. And it presented itself as Miley Cyrus and Her Dead Pets. It was raw, it was experimental, it was real, it was sad, and it has this like cult following. I'll be fully transparent. I didn't listen to it that much when it came out. I kind of didn't understand it. But as I got older and kind of listened to it more and like kind of separated what, like, you know, all of the pieces of it, I was like, okay, wait, I get why she had to do this. She did end up touring it. She ended up, you know, really just trying to make what she could out of this album. And it was a dark time, I would imagine, for Miley, from like thinking about what she was going through in that time. But I think, like I said, she needed this creative bug to kind of like crawl out of her so she could kind of go on to figure out what her next sound was. And I don't think anybody could have predicted that her next album would be a country pop album. Flash forward to Younger Now. So she was kind of ready to strip back this bad girl provocative reputation. And she was going back to her roots, but not like her musical roots, her actual roots, and taking it back to Nashville, really her country roots, getting her cowboy boots on and doing the damn thing. She releases the first single, which is Malibu, and it was this like stripped back, kind of like refreshing beachy track that was a complete 180 from what we were used to, kind of reminiscent of a backyard session track because there wasn't a crazy production on it. It was very simple, it was fun, it was uplifting, and people loved it, but it definitely was a complete shift from everything we had heard from her in the past. At this point, 5 years? Like, it was such a bizarre shift in music, but it made sense because she was like, it was such a complete shift in her sound and her persona. She was back with Liam at this point. There were rumors swirling that she was engaged, which we later found out they got married in that December. The album came out, it debuted at number 5 in the US charts. And by this point, we kind of knew that Miley wasn't making music for sale. She had just released Dead Pets as a independent album. She clearly did not care how well it did on the charts because there was no chart for it to chart on. I think she was at this point just releasing music that felt right to her and felt comfortable and really executed how she was feeling in that moment. And of course, as we see this, like, she definitely has gone through some phases that were some more outlandish than the others, if you want to call it that. And you're kind of learning that, like I said, she can't be kept in one box. She's really not somebody who likes to just stick to one groove, and she likes to play around and experiment. And we're still seeing that today. 2 weeks before the album came out, she literally said that she was already over the album. Before Younger Now had come out, she was already over it, and 2 songs deep into the next one. She moved on from Younger Now pretty quick, and she went on to release Nothing Breaks Like a Heart with Mark Ronson in 2018, which had like this like disco, not country, but a little twang to it, little pop. It was kind of like bridging the gap between a few of her albums because we had that like dancey, disco-y kind of vibe to it, but she still had that like Younger Now twang to it. And then coming in 2019, comes out and she is rebellious again. She's singing about drugs, singing about partying, singing about sex. And she kind of has always come back to this rebel persona. I don't think it's intentional. I think it just really is who she is. I keep saying she can't be kept in a box. And I think the idea of her sticking with one image or sound, she's one of those artists that like really likes to change it up. And, you know, you think of artists like Madonna, artists like Cher, who kind of are always playing with their look and things like that. Like it's kind of that idea. And this album this EP rather had some killer tracks on it. Mother's Daughter, Unholy, Party Up the Street. She was working with Mike Will Made It Again, who worked on Bangers and Dead Pets. Like, she was really going back to like find those old sounds and kind of reinvent not only her look, but also her sound. She was doing like the wet hair look. She was being so vocal about women's rights, which is great. And she was really like leaning into how her music can be, not protest music, but like, yeah, protest music. this was the time where we were protesting for women's bodies and women's rights, and people were playing this at protest march. Like she was becoming this like voice of this revolution almost in that sense. Like she was really allowing her music to be the soundtrack to so many celebratory political, if you want to call it. She performs at Glastonbury that year. I mean, she literally had RuPaul on this EP. This was a very fun time for Miley to really just like make a big splash back with her fans. It didn't do crazy commercially. I don't think a lot of people know these songs outside of like Stan Twitter. Honestly, it's not like an album that people resonate with, but I think to kind of prepare us for what was to come in 2020, it really set us up to understand that like, hey, this is what I'm doing. You guys are kind of in on this secret, you being the fans. And now let's release Plastic Hearts in 2020. So at the end of 2019, though, let me not get ahead of myself, her and Liam get divorced. We were kind of seeing him being controlling to her, kind of on the red carpets, not letting Miley be Miley, which we all know she doesn't like to do. The last time we're going to be chatting about Liam in this episode because I've talked about him like 3 times. That's 3 times too many for my liking. So 2020 rolls around and we get Plastic Hearts and we get this full send into pop rock Miley. Finally, she's kind of teetered with this sound before. I mean, even back like Start All Over, she had that little like, not rock, but you know, that little more edgy sound. She's done like Guns N' Roses covers, and she's done Joan Jett covers. She's always talking about her, you know, she has these rock influences in her life, and that's the music that she likes to listen to. And she's finally diving into this pop punk sound, and it worked. It debuts at number 1. She said the country wasn't really for me. It wasn't home. She credited Mark Ronson for helping her carve out her sound where she could really do anything that she wanted, which is something more modern, which is exactly what we got with the Plastic Hearts album. And this sound just made a lot of sense where she was at in her life. Like, she was going through a divorce. She was angry. She was angsty. She was really trying to like show us that like I am creating this sound and vision for myself to, like I said, emulate where she is in her life. Like we saw with Younger Now, like we saw with Bangers, like her music really speaks to where she's at in her life and what she wants us to perceive is not the word, but it's the only word that's coming to me. But how she wants to be perceived, I guess. It's like, this is who I am right now. It's going to be different in a few years, or it might be the same in a few years, but this is where I'm at. And her albums kind of act as time capsules in that sense, because they kind of give us like, oh, this is what's going on in her life at this point. And like I said with Bangers, for me, like I can kind of look back at when her albums came out and be like, oh, this happened when this album came out. Like they kind of act as time capsules in that sense, which is pretty cool. So that's 2020. We get Plastic Heart. She does her thing. Obviously, we're in a pandemic. She can't tour it or anything, unfortunately. And she goes on to release some singles through the years. And then fast forward just a little bit to 2023, we get Endless Summer Vacation. And my God, did this era start with a bang. I don't think anybody could have predicted how commercially successful Flowers was going to come to be, but it was insane. It topped the charts for 8 consecutive weeks. It won her first Grammy. Like, this song was crazy. This album was her first album with a new label, and it just felt like a real product of her artistry and her love. And that's kind of something you see with Miley through her career. She kind of leans out of the idea of like just releasing music to release music, and she starts leaning into the artistry of her albums. You know, when she was on Disney, she was releasing an album pretty much every year. We had 2007, 2008, 2009 was an EP, then 2010. That was her last album with Hollywood, and she takes this break to really find herself and discover her sound. 3 years later, we get Bangers. 2 years after that, she discovers her sound again, and we get Dead Pets. Then from there, she kind of keeps discovering this sound. She's taking these breaks to really play with her artistry and really figure out what sound she's vibing with, because she, like I said, she can't be kept in one box. She's somebody who likes to be a little edgy and a little rough around the edges and really like keep us on our toes, you know? So this was not a whole new sound, but it really felt like a full artistic album for her. She shifts it halfway through. The first half is AM, the second half is PM. So we get kind of more, not slowed down, but more like not as crazy produced songs in the first half, and then in the second half of the album we get a little more production, a little more beats, a little more bass, a little more experimental as it goes. And even on the vinyl, and when you look at the track list, it says AM, PM. So she's playing with this idea of like a concept album. And just looking at like the rollout for that album and all the artistic and musical choices she made. I mean, going back to those backyard sessions with Disney, and she was going back to her Disney roots, but also going back to this like stripped back sound that she loves so much. And it really felt like a traditional Miley sound with an adult vision to it. You know, it really had this like mature feel to the whole album and the way she was dressing and presenting herself. And you could tell she was really excited about what she was releasing. You know, it was something she was really proud of, really passionate about. And then we lead to current day, and we get to no other than Something Beautiful. Now, of course, last year we got Doctor Work It Out, which was the song with Pharrell, but that was a bangers track that they released. Honestly, not too sure how it came about with the release 11 years later, but that's neither here nor there. And now we're fast forward to current day with Something Beautiful. As I said, this album really feels like a love child of so many of her put together. I feel like we're going to get a little bit of Dead Pets, a little bit of Plastic Hearts, a little bit of Can't Be Tamed. We're going to get a lot of these experimental sounds from this album that are really going to create a whole different environment than we've seen Miley in before. She's not riding the coattails of the success of Flowers, which I love. She's not trying to recreate that viral moment that she had with Flowers, because she understands that that was that moment in time. Now I am onto a new album. And that's kind of how she always approaches things. She always approaches things as a new full project, which I really appreciate. She doesn't lean too much on the nostalgia and the past projects. Of course, she's always going to perform the old hits, and she's always going to have fun with it. And I really think she's come a long way with those songs and with that music. I think for a while she kind of resented it, but I think now she's found a fun way to do it, and she kind of puts a new spin on these songs, and she knows it's what we all want to hear, and we all love her new music, but we all met her with these older songs. And I think she's finally coming to terms with her just being like, I am Miley Cyrus. Like, I am so many people's first concerts, first albums that they bought. I am truly an icon in the pop culture space, in the pop music space. And I think she's in a place right now where this new album that we're going to get from her is really going to shock a lot of people in a good way and show off not just her vocal ability, but her creative decisions, her visual decisions. I think we're really going to get a crazy piece of art with this album. Might be one of those things that some people get it, some people don't, but that's always Miley's vibe. Some people understand her, some people don't, and she doesn't care either way. She's going to do what she wants, keep the truck rolling, and just like do anything that Miley wants to do because she's Miley Cyrus and she can. That was so much fun. That really felt like not only a trip down Miley's memory lane, but my memory lane. Like, as I was doing that, I was like, oh my God, I forgot that I went to this event. I forgot that I did this. I forgot that, I was where I was when this happened. That was so much fun. I really love doing these episodes where I kind of like dive into the, the pop culture and the culture effects that an artist has had in their career throughout their album releases. So if you guys like this kind of episode, let me know, because I will definitely do more as like artists start releasing albums. I think this is really fun, and I think it's a fun way to kind of get excited for an album and look back at artists' past projects. So I love that. That was a lot of fun. Obviously, it matters if you guys love it as well. So let me know in the comments. Let me know your favorite Miley era in the comments, whether it's her era, an album. Let me know what you're thinking about Something Beautiful down in the comments. If you're on Spotify, you can leave a comment. If you're on YouTube, you can leave a comment. And if you can't leave a comment, shoot me a DM. Let's chit chat. I could talk about Miley Cyrus for hours, clearly. So let's keep this party rolling offline. Moving on to our second to last segment in this show, it is our TV recap, and you guys know the drill. It is another day in the workroom. This week's Drag Race episode was the best episode of the entire season, and one of my favorite makeover challenges they've ever done, just solely for the wholesome vibes that you could feel in that workroom. It was just like, it was so heartwarming to see them with all of their parents and the way that they all reacted to their parents being there. And I think all these queens have a really unique experience with their parents. Like, all of them had such unique stories with their parents, with their coming out, how they support their drag, their relationships with them, and like just seeing them all show up for them regardless of their past and their history. It was a really beautiful episode. I don't know how to explain it, but it was very heartwarming. And I think the best way to go about it is let's just hop into these runways. First up, we had Lexi Love, and I really liked this look. I thought it was really, really cute. I thought it was smart to play into the love of it all, kind of like the Valentine's Day with the hearts and the pinks and the whites. And yes, a few weeks ago, I did say I'm tired of seeing her with these veils, but it made sense for this week. Like, it made sense for her to dress her and her mom as Lexi Love, and I forget her mom's drag name, but to do it with the, signature Lexi Love veil, because that is her drag persona. So I'll let it slide this week. Sam Starr, this was fantastic. This was a masterclass in a makeover challenge. This was perfection from head to toe, and her mom kind of outshined her on the runway. I'm not gonna lie. Like, her mom kind of stole the show. They both crushed it. This was fantastic. No notes. Absolutely loved it. Then we had Susie, and it was definitely a Susie Toot coated look. I didn't love it. However, Law Roach said it was the most fashion forward look on the runway, so it's got to be good. It wasn't that it was bad. I just was like, I wasn't gagging. Like, it wasn't anything like I was like, whoa. I thought it was cute the way her and her mom were. I liked like the characters they played where like Susie led and then her mom followed. Like, it told a story. It was cute. It was theatrical. It was very Susie. Just visually, I was like, all right, like, it is what it is. It wasn't my least favorite though, and you guys will probably be shocked who my least favorite was, which is kind of giving away because it's a shock, but we'll get there in a moment. Next up, we had Jules Sparkles. This was really cute, but I was promised a reveal. And don't promise me a reveal if you're not going to give me one. I understand we got one later on, but if she wasn't in the bottom, spoiler alert, we would not have gotten the reveal. And I wanted to see her dad do a reveal because I thought it would have been cunt. Whatever. It was cute. It was safe. It was nothing crazy, but it was cute. It was fun. Whatever. It was what it was. And finally, we have Anya, my girl. She can't be perfect every week. Like, it gets exhausting being the front runner of this competition. So I understand, like, she can't be the one really pulling the weight all the time. However, I did not like this look. It wasn't the worst look I've ever seen on Drag Race, of course. Like, there's been much worse things on this runway, but I was like, this just like wasn't that great. But her story with her dad was really, really sweet, and you could really tell that their connection is really strong. So for that, she's still the winner in my eyes. We find out the winner this week in RuPaul's eyes is Sam Starr, fully deserved. She absolutely destroyed this week. It was unbelievable. And the bottom two are Jules and Anya Nerve, which either of these queens going home is going to sting. So I was truly biting my nails down to my nail beds. I was like, holy shit, who is going to go home? They lip sync to Amerie's One Thing, which is such a good song. I fucking love that song. They killed it. Jules' reveal, we finally got it. It was worth the wait. However, I did want to see one with your dad, but I'll give it to you because the way that she flipped that wig off and took that coat off at the same time, I was gagged. I surely was gagged by that reveal. Anya kicking the wig. Like, Jules was giving us the dance and the drag of it, but Anya was giving us a lip sync. Like, it was so dramatic in two different ways, And then we find out that it is a double Shantae. Thank God, because the two of them, yeah, they weren't the best of the week, but it wasn't a terrible week for the two of them. Like, it wasn't a week where it was like, all right, you guys got to go home. Like, this was the time to do a double Shantae. I knew we had one coming. Thomas actually called it before the episode started. He was like, I feel like we're getting a double stay tonight. I just feel like it's going to happen. And what do you know? He was correct. And that wraps up our TV recap this week, which means we have made it to the end of the episode. It is time for my yes and my mess of the week. My yes being something I am loving and my mess being something I am not loving. And we always start things on a high note here at Too Pop to Handle. Actually, my yes and my mess this week, I believe these people have both been yeses and messes in the past, but for different reasons, of course. But I think this is the first time I've had like a double yes and a mess who have also been repeats. However, these people just deserve the titles when they deserve it. So it is what it is. And kicking it off on a high note, we have Miss Kelly Clarkson. Yesterday, March 31st, was Trans Day of Visibility, and she, on one of the highest watched morning talk shows on cable television, took a moment to shout out the trans community and talk about how important it is to support trans lives. She highlighted a trans artist and just like completely took a whole moment to talk about how important Trans Day of Visibility is. And that's not something we see on television ever. It is the trans community, I've said it so many times before and it breaks my heart, but they are the most underrepresented and under-supported, unfortunately, group within the LGBTQIA plus community. And it breaks my heart, truly. But seeing Kelly Clarkson, the American Idol, give a moment on her television show to talk about Trans Day of Visibility and just take the time to make sure that her audience knows where she stands and understands that, like, this is important. Trans lives matter. Trans people need to be heard and seen, and, you know, all of the above. It was just fantastic. Kelly Clarkson's one of those celebrities where, like, we made the right person famous, you know? Like, somehow they scouted out for American Idol. They scouted out for the best voice in America, and not only found the best voice in America, but also, like, the best human being in America. Kelly Clarkson can do no wrong in my eyes. She is just, I just adore her so much. And when I saw this, I literally had something else as my guest this week. Instantly, I was like, nope. Take it off. We're putting Kelly in, because it's been a minute since I've talked about Kelly on the podcast. I feel like I went through a time where I was talking about her every week almost, and I feel like it's been a minute. So I was like, I need to, you know, dust off my Kelly Clarkson trophy on my shelf and give her shining moment, because Kelly Clarkson deserves the entire world. And moving on to my mess, somebody who does not deserve the entire world and kind of ties perfectly into the Miley Cyrus of it all is Billy Ray Cyrus. So he took to his Instagram last week and decided to post a photo of Miley and Noah. Miley from the Something Beautiful trailer and Noah from one of her new music videos. I haven't listened to her new music yet. I need to check it out, but I'll get to it when I get to it. However, he posted a photo of the two of them and said, "Holy shit, I seldom ever swear in my posts, but this deserves one. You are witnessing in real time what it feels like for a dad who is within less than 1 week's time has had his ass kicked and his mind blowed by not one, but two of his own daughters. At Miley Cyrus, at Noah Cyrus, flesh and blood, completely taking their art to a whole new level. Congratulations, girls. Well done. I'm so damn proud of both of you. I'm actually crying as I write this. Thank God you can't see me. Have fun now and be happy. Love, Dad." Reading this without any context, how cute. So sweet, a supportive dad. But when you look back at Billy Ray Cyrus, especially in the last few months, when Trump is calling out his daughter on a press conference and asking, "How did you get such a liberal daughter?" And he goes on to perform at the inauguration and doesn't stand up for his daughter. You don't get to pick and choose when you're a supportive parent. Like, if the president of the United States, who is just probably the worst human being alive, calls your daughter out and you decide to not stand up for her, but go and perform at the inauguration and also make a fool of yourself at the inauguration, you don't get to come online and talk about how proud you are and how much you love her when it's convenient for you. And then today, for April Fool's Day, he posts a photo of Miley again and says, "No April Fool's joke. This Something Beautiful video is serious Cyrus. At Miley Cyrus, bringing the heat. Link on my stories." And I'm just like, you don't get to do this. You don't get to let grown men speak negatively about your daughter. And I'm sure the things you have said about her behind everybody's back, knowing what you've said about Tish in those leaked audio things and, like, the drama with his ex-wife, and, like, he just has had, and again, people struggle with things. I'm not, like, diminishing the things that he has gone through and stuff like that. That is fine. But, like, you can't publicly pretty much side with somebody talking shit about your daughter, and then when she's releasing music and when it's buzzy again, after you get completely ripped apart from your terrible inauguration performance, you can't now come online and talk about how proud you are of your daughters and act like they're going to come running. I can say what I want. I don't have to run back to Billy Ray Cyrus, and I'm not going to. Keep your post to yourself. We don't want to see it. And with that, we have made it to the end of our episode. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Too Pop to Handle. If you guys liked what you heard and you're listening to us as a podcast, please go ahead and leave me a 5-star rating. Like I said, my birthday is this Sunday, so if you want to get me a present, go ahead and leave me a 5-star rating. It is free. It is the cheapest birthday gift you could give me, and it would mean the world to me. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you give us a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment down below. Let me know your favorite Miley era. Let me know how you're feeling about the Something Beautiful era. Let's get this conversation going. If you would like to follow us on social media, we are at 2pop to handle across all platforms. And if you would like to follow me on all of my platforms, I am at Andrew Nucatola. And with that, I will catch you guys next week. Bye.